Essay 26 here on page 78 of this exciting book published in 1865 called American Miscellany. So we just learned a little bit about the Dead Sea, and excuse me, now we're on essay number 26, and we're learning about books, their publication and circulation. It is a very common thing to hear of the evils of pernicious reading, of how it enervates the mind or how it depraves the principles. The complaints are doubtless just. These books could not be read, and these evils would be spared the world if one did not write, and another did not print, and another did not sell, and another did not circulate them. Are those, then, without whose agency the mischief could not ensue, to be held innocent in affording this agency? Yet loudly as we complain of the evil, and carefully as we warn our children to avoid it, how seldom do we hear public reprobation of the writers? As to printers and booksellers and library keepers, we scarcely hear their offenses mentioned at all. We speak not of those abandoned publications which all respectable men condemn, but of those which, pernicious as they are confessed to be, furnish reading rooms and libraries, and are habitually sold in almost every bookseller's store. He that lends a man money to use for an improper purpose, or a weapon for his revenge, makes himself a partner of his crime. He, too, who writes or sells a book which will in all probability injure the reader, is accessory to the mischief which, he's assuming that he's not one of these people publishing the terrible reading, okay? Because we're currently reading a book that's been published and is objectively a little bit terrible. Okay. There's no need for editorial comments here. Okay. When we see, let's back up a little bit. Okay. Okay, so he too who writes or sells a book which will in all probability injure the reader is accessory to the mischief which may be done, with this aggravation that while the money would probably do mischief but to one or two persons, the book may injure 100 or 1,000. Of the writers of injurious books we need not say more. If the inferior agents are censurable, the primary agent must be more censurable. A printer or a bookseller should, however, reflect that to be not so bad as another is a very different thing from being innocent. When we see that the owner of a press will print any work that is offered to him with no other concern about its tendency than whether it will subject him to penalties from the law, we surely must perceive that he exercises but a very imperfect virtue. Is it obligatory upon us not to promote ill principles in other men? He does not fulfill the obligation. Is it obligatory upon us to promote rectitude by unimpeachable example? He does not exhibit that example. If it were right for my neighbor to furnish me with the means of moral injury, it would not be wrong for me to accept and to employ them. Let us stand in a bookseller's store and observe his customers successfully coming in. One orders a lexicon, and one a work of scurrilous infidelity, one Captain Cook's Voyages, and one a new licentious romance. If the bookseller takes and excuses all these orders with the same willingness, we cannot but perceive that there is an inconsistency and incompleteness in his moral principles of action. Perhaps this person is so conscious of the mischievous effects of such books that he would not allow them in the hands of his children, nor suffer them to be seen on his parlor table. But if he thus knows the evils which they inflict, can it be right for him to be the agent in diffusing them? Such a person does not exhibit that consistency, that completeness of virtuous conduct, without which the Christian character cannot be fully exhibited. Step into the store of this bookseller's neighbor, a druggist, and there, if a person asks for some arsenic, the apothecary begins to be anxious. He considers whether it is probable the buyer wants it for a proper purpose. If he does sell it, he cautions the buyer to keep it where others cannot have access to it, and before he delivers the packet, legibly inscribes upon it poison. One of these men sells poison to the body, and the other poison to the mind. If the anxiety and caution of the druggists are right, the indifference of the bookseller must be wrong. Add to which that the druggist would not sell arsenic at all if it were not sometimes useful. But to what readers can a vicious book be useful? Suppose for a moment that no printer would commit such a book to his press, and that no bookseller would sell it. The consequence would be that 9/10 of these manuscripts would be thrown into the fire, or rather that they would not have been written. The inference is obvious, and surely it is not needful again to enforce the consideration that although your refusal might not prevent vicious books from being published, you are not therefore exempted from the obligation to refuse. A man must do his duty whether the effects of his fidelity be such as he would desire or not. Such purity of conduct might no doubt circumscribe a man's busyness, and so does purity of conduct in some other professions. But if this be a sufficient excuse for assisting to demoralize the world, if profits be a justification of a departure from rectitude, it will be easy to defend the business of a pickpocket. We know that the principles of conduct which these remarks recommend lead to grave practical consequences. We know that they lead to the conclusion that the business of a printer or bookseller, as it is ordinarily conducted, is not consistent with Christian uprightness. A man may carry on a business in select works, and this, by some conscientious persons, is really done. In the present state of the press, the difficulty of obtaining a considerable business as a bookseller without circulating injurious works may frequently be great, and it is in consequence of this difficulty that we see so few booksellers among the Quakers. The few who do conduct the business generally reside in large towns where the demand for all books is so great that a person can procure a competent income, though he excludes the bad. He who is more studious to justify his conduct than to act aright may say that if a person may sell no book that can injure another, he can scarcely sell any book. The answer is that although there must be some difficulty in discrimination, though a bookseller cannot always inform himself what the precise tendency of a book is, yet there can be no difficulty in judging respecting numerous books that their tendency is bad. If we cannot define the precise distinction between the good and the evil, we can nevertheless perceive the evil when it has attained to a certain extent. He who cannot distinguish day from twilight can distinguish it from night. The case of the proprietors of common circulating libraries is yet more palpable, because the majority of the books which they contain inflict injury upon their readers. How it happens that persons of respectable character and who join with others in lamenting the frivolity and worse than frivolity of the age, nevertheless daily and hourly contribute to the mischief, without any apparent consciousness of inconsistency, it is difficult to explain. A person establishes, perhaps, one of these libraries for the first time in a country town. He supplies the younger and less busy part of the inhabitants with a source of moral injury from which hitherto they have been exempt. The girl who till now possessed sober views of life, he teaches to dream of the extravagance of love. He familiarizes her ideas with intrigue and licentiousness, destroys her disposition for rational pursuits, and prepares her, it may be, for a victim of debauchery. These evils, or such as these, he inflicts not upon one or two, but upon as many as he can. And yet this person lays his head upon his pillow as if, in all this, he was not offending against virtue or against man. So I believe this next little blurb, this little paragraph, is not related to the previous essay, but I'll go ahead and read it out, as it's only this long. This next little bit is on the Bible. There is no other volume in the world which grows in interest by repeated reading. We may study Bacon, Butler, or Boyle, but so soon as the argument is appreciated and the truth appropriated, the mind labors through another reading. But every passage in the New Testament is fruitful of varied suggestions, and the more spiritual the mind of the reader, the more fruitful of good is the passage read. Because one passage suggests others, and thus, like the links of a chain, attains some new or some impressive view of God's character and of human duty.